in 2018, they changed the lyrics to "O Canada." I hadn't been following the news about it at the time, and I remember leading the anthem at an assembly when I was politely informed I was singing the wrong words. The old version wasn't very gender inclusive. For those who were a bit late to the game like me, what used to be "in all thy sons' command" was changed to "in all of us' command." I understood why, of course, but I can't help but hate the new version because I don't think it makes any grammatical sense. "In all of us' command," if it were true patriot love under our command, that would work. I could live with that. The original anthem was the French version, written by Adolphe Passy-Routier in 1880, which we still often use today. "Il sait porter la croix." He, Canada, knows how to carry the cross. Words matter. And this is by no means inclusive language, but it is worth remembering that Canada was founded as a Christian country, and I can live with that. If you thought "in all thy sons' command" was part of the original English version, you could be forgiven. That's what I thought too. The English "O Canada" was written by Robert Stanley Weir in 1908. But in his original, the phrase was, "True patriot love, thou dost in us command." And it makes so much more sense. True patriot love, thou dost in us command. You, Canada, command that we should feel true patriot love within us. What a beautiful sentiment. Antiquated language, yes, but powerful because the idea that the words communicate matters. And I could have lived with that. But just 5 years later, in 1913, Weir changed it to "in all thy sons' command." On the one hand, we might excuse this as acceptable within the context of the time period. But on the other hand, 1913 was also the dawn of women's suffrage movement in Canada. Just 3 years later, Manitoba became the first province to grant women the right to vote. And only 2 years after that, all Canadian women gained the right to vote in federal elections. It stands to reason that there could have been a lot of people who bristled at the new wording for "O Canada." Still, it wasn't yet our official anthem, so why complain? The song wouldn't be adopted officially by Parliament as the Canadian national anthem until, anybody know? 1980. 1980! Long after the 1967 Royal Commission on the Status of Women, long after the rise of second-wave feminism, and after the 1977 Canadian Human Rights Act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex. In 1980, nobody was beholden to "O Canada," and we could have just as easily had a different anthem. But Parliament went with "in all thy sons' command." They could have made a simple change: "True patriot love, in all our hearts' command." That would have been a meaningful fix, because the words matter, and I could have lived with that. Canada's history of discrimination, of course, is far darker than a single phrase in the national anthem. Japanese-Canadian internment, the Chinese head tax and exclusion act, and of course the infamous residential schools. Nevertheless, Jewish Canadians have tried to be a force for good, supporting the legitimate governors of this country even when we strongly disagree, and commending our government when historic wrongs, such as the residential schools, are acknowledged by this nation. Every Shabbat in shul, today included, we recite a prayer for Canada, its government, its leaders, and all who wield just and righteous authority to safeguard our society. The Canadian flag. has always stood on our bima, beside the flag of Israel. Pride in Canada has run deep in the Jewish community ever since the first Jews arrived, even when it wasn't easy. Mount Sinai Hospital was founded in 1923 by Jewish women philanthropists at 100 Yorkville Avenue because Jewish doctors and nurses faced systemic barriers at mainstream hospitals. So we built our own, not for Jewish patients per se, but so Jewish physicians could serve all Canadians, with a special focus on women's and maternal health. Our community has fought in Canada's wars, sung its anthem in our schools, and flown its flag at our rallies. Every Sunday at Bathurst and Shepherd, the Canadian flag flies alongside the Israeli flag in the face of hatred and bigotry. Today, I'm wearing a kittel, but on every other occasion that calls for a suit, I wear a pin with the Canadian and Israeli flags together. No, Canada has never been perfect. We vividly remember none is too many. When Canada not only closed its doors to Jews in our darkest hour of need, but spit in our eye for good measure. Those painful words mattered a lot to us. They still haunt us as a chilling reminder that no matter how Canadian Jews see themselves, in the eyes of many Canadians, we are Jews first and Canadians a very distant second. Despite the insult, if I'm honest, I guess I can live with that too, because I know that's how I've been seeing myself, especially over the last couple of years. Before October 7th, I know that I certainly thought Canadian society had evolved since the days of none is too many. I thought, as I know many of you did, that on the whole, Canada was a modern beacon of equality and respect for diversity, a place where Jews could prosper. After standing proudly with Canada for so long, singing the anthem, flying the flag, building the hospital, sending our children into the armed forces, today we are faced with a Canada that now is living up to the odd and ambiguous words of its anthem, words that were chosen because they sounded good, all for the sake of a hollow performance without regard for what the words mean. On Sunday, Prime Minister Carney announced that Canada now recognizes the state of Palestine at the United Nations. A hollow performance indeed, all the while leaving Canada's Jewish community feeling shaken, afraid, and betrayed. This latest slap across the face is made even worse because a few short months ago, the Prime Minister himself set out clear conditions for recognition. He insisted that recognition of a state of Palestine would only follow if there were fundamental reforms to Palestinian governance, free and fair elections in which Hamas would play no role, the return of all Israeli hostages, and a process of demilitarization, and though he didn't say it what he should have, also de-radicalization. He stated plainly that recognition must never legitimize terrorism. When I stop and I really think carefully about what satisfying all of these conditions would mean, I think I could have lived with that. And yet, recognition has now come unilaterally. Not a single condition met. The Jewish community of Canada reads this message loud and clear. Our concerns are of no concern. Hamas and groups like it have also heard this message, that you can massacre, take hostages, rain rockets on civilians, and still be rewarded with legitimacy. It tells every Islamist movement in the world that if you terrorize long enough, the West will eventually hand you political victory. It tells the Jewish people in Canada, who have stood by this country with loyalty and pride, that our fears can be set aside in the name of symbolism. Hours after Prime Minister Carney's recognition of Palestine, an emboldened Hamas filmed the public execution of 3 Gazans accused of the ubiquitous crime of collaborating with Israel. Make no mistake, we have warned our leaders to wake up and see that this is not just about Israel. If violence and terror are rewarded in the Middle East, then others will draw the same lesson. Those who dream of toppling democracies, who despise our freedoms, who loathe everything that enables us to live free and openly as Jews in Canada, they will see encouragement here. They will see that terrorism works. We know the truth that peace will only come when terror is defeated, when extremists are disarmed, when children can grow up without being taught to hate their neighbors. Recognition before those conditions are met is not a pathway to peace. It is a capitulation to terrorism. It is a surrender under the threat of violence. This past Shabbat, my son Rafi started walking. You saw him right here. For weeks, he could take just a few steps, as long as he was holding on to me or Jamie. Many of you will remember that Rafi was born 6 weeks premature and has had a few developmental bumps to overcome. One of them has been learning to walk, for which he's been doing specialized physiotherapy. We knew he would get there eventually, but we were told to guard our expectations. Suffice it to say that Jamie and I were both crying when suddenly on Shabbat afternoon he just stood up without any help and walked clear across the room. Becoming a dad has made me reflect on my own experience growing up here in Canada. And the fact that Rafi will not be able to experience the same freedom and safety that I enjoyed. Instead of Jewish themes like peace and prosperity to grow up with, he will have to grow up with strength and resilience. I was privileged to have grown up never personally witnessing a single act of anti-Semitism until I was 25 years old. And that wasn't even in Canada. I remember growing up annoyed when I went to shul on the high holidays when Rabbi Kelman at Beth Emet gave yet another sermon on anti-Semitism, again with the anti-Semitism. I knew it was important, but I felt safe. Did we really need to depress ourselves by highlighting it again on Rosh Hashanah? I wore my kippah in public without incident, or even the fear of an incident. I felt safe to walk to shul, to light a Chanukiah in my window, to speak Hebrew on a bus. But this year has been different. For the first time in my life, I no longer feel that same safety that I once took for granted. On several occasions this past year, my own home was photographed by people making their way to harass Jews on the corner of Bathurst and Shepherd. Many of you have told me that you are asking hard questions in your families. Is it time to leave? Is there still a future for Jews in Canada? I want you to know that I hear this pain. I understand this fear. And I want to say as clearly as I can, I do not believe that the end of Jewish life in Canada is a foregone conclusion. Despite everything, I still have faith in Canada. At last week's UJA launch, Douglas Murray, Douglas, said something that struck me deeply. That everywhere Jews fly the flag of Israel in the diaspora, we also fly the flag of the country we call home, wherever it is. And here in Canada, our flag stands side by side with the maple leaf. Contrast that with the anti-Zionist side, where flags of host countries are not embraced but burned. Douglas Murray was right. It speaks volumes, not only about the difference in character between each side, but how Jews see ourselves as part of the fabric of the countries we live in. We build them. We contribute to them. We pray for their welfare, for Jews and non-Jews alike. That's why today I brought with me a small symbol of this loyalty. The pin I wear at every public event, the flags of Israel and Canada together. I have a whole bunch left. And I'll gladly give one to anyone who wants to wear it as a sign of pride, of hope, and of solidarity. But before I order more, I'm waiting to see some sign, some genuine sign that Canada is once again ready to live up to its own words and its own promises. Because the truth is, this is not the time to walk away. This is not the time to give up on Canada. It is the time to fight for the soul of Canada, for the values of democracy, freedom, and justice that Jews have helped nurture in this land since the very beginning. And that, my friends, is what the High Holidays asks of us. Not to run from the hard questions, not to surrender to despair, but to look honestly at our lives, at our society, at our leaders, and ask, what must we change? Where have we failed? And where must we find the courage to stand up again and fight for what matters most? And so as we stand here on the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, I remind myself that our prayers are not only for Israel, and not only for Canada, but for the entire world. Every year we declare Unatana Tokef, Uteshuva, Utefila, Utsedaka, Ma'avirin et Road Zera. Repentance, prayer, and righteousness can avert the severity of the decree. We cannot control the actions of governments. We cannot, although they think we can, we cannot control the hatred of those who wish us harm. But we can control how we respond with teshuvah, with tefillah, with tzedakah, with courage, with compassion, and with the faith that God is with us in this struggle as always. To pray for both flags together is not a contradiction. It is an expression of faith that God's sovereignty encompasses all peoples, and that our Jewish mandate is not only to survive, but to help bring God's presence into this world. The maple leaf and the Magen David together is a political statement, yes, but it's also a spiritual one. It is a spiritual statement that declares that we continue to believe in God's promise, that light can emerge from darkness, that truth can outlast falsehood, and that the Jewish people still have work to do here in Canada. Because we are Canadian Jews, because we Canadian Jews have a lot to say to our government right now. And our words matter. We do not choose them flippantly, and we back our words up with meaningful action. We know what our words mean when we say never again. We know what our words mean in our Torah and in our prayers on the high holidays as we stand before God in the heavenly court. We know what our words mean when we say in one resounding voice, Am Yisrael Chai, without even the tiniest hint of apology. On this Rosh Hashanah, as we enter a new year, we once again continue to pray for the leaders of our government in Canada, that they might also find the words to make all of Canada proud again. And not just say the words, but understand them, live by them, so that true patriot love will not be an empty, meaningless lyric, but a sacred commitment to ourselves, to our neighbors, and to our fellow Canadian citizens. So it's not Hatikva, but the deal is still on the table. If we can all commit to true patriot love, we Canadian Jews can live with that. Shana Tova Umetuka.